calves love consistency and routine. So there's 3 pillars to calf health. There's the calf itself, feeding, immunity, and what we're going to do with it. The next pillar is the environment. So having somebody throwing an external eye on that environment, just checking ventilation, looking at drainage, and then routines, people. It's all about people. So just checking your routine, go through your milk replacer, going through your feeding regime, what's your plan if you have sick calves, how do you identify a sick calf, what's your plan of action, because early intervention with disease issues is really key as well.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan and this is the third part of a Dairy Calf to Beef podcast series. On this week's episode, I'm joined by vet Tommy Heffernan, which many of you may know as Tommy the Vet, to discuss the key areas to ensure a healthy calf, to develop a sustainable and profitable dairy beef system. Tommy, you're very welcome. What are the most common health problems that you see in dairy beef calves in the spring?
Typically what we'll see is classically pneumonia will be the big one. We might see a little bit of scour. So we're buying in calves. Pneumonia seems to be the ongoing big risk. You might see a scour as secondary in the first weeks, particularly when they come in. And then later on we'll see more challenges with parasites like coccidiosis. And then your bits and pieces like ringworm and other things can be issues. But mainly pneumonia is the big one.
And does the spring weather, such as cold nights or wet conditions, does that impact on calf health risks?
Massively so. It's one of the challenges in seasonal systems, particularly in Ireland. We see that because of our damp, humid weather in winter time and changes in temperature that can be quite rapid, that has quite an impact on the immune system. Calves can get cold. When it gets cold and humid in sheds and there's poor airflow, that actually, if we think about the respiratory system of calves, that affects them. If you put in ammonia on top of that and bedding, it is a real risk. So what happens is either cold affects immune function or it's the weather shifts that can have an impact on respiratory health in calves.
And you mentioned pneumonia there. Why are we seeing it as such a number one issue in calves?
Well, we think about buying in calves, even if we're buying them off a source farm, even if it's 10 miles down the road. Essentially, we're changing the calves' environment. They've been transported. All those changes create stress. Now, what the real challenge is of course, we're often getting calves from market, or they're travelling bigger distances, and they're coming from different farms. So people with kids will be familiar with this. When kids go back to school and they're all after a summer been mixed in together, that's when they get respiratory disease. Calves aren't that much different because they're coming from different sources, so there'll be different diseases. The stress of the transport, change of diet and new environment puts the immune system under pressure, and these viruses are often shedding from animals that might not seem like they're sick, and that combination leads into pneumonia being the big risk for dairy to beef systems.
And from your experience, what management practices can farmers carry out to avoid such outbreaks?
So the basics are still the basics, really important. So when we think about, you're trying to always, we've been saying it for a long time, source your calves from a farm where colostrum management, feeding management. The more you know about where the calf comes from, the better the job that's done there, the easier it is. But as a general rule, when we're transporting calves, a well-bedded trailer, when they're getting to the farm, try and get milk into them straight away. Unless they've had a long journey, electrolytes might be something you'd use. And the simple thing of a very deeply bedded, warm pen that they can go into that has good ventilation. Try and have an all-in, all-out system. So if you're buying batches of calves, try and fill pen by pen, not be mixing age groups as much as possible. And of course, vaccination programs are very important in dairy to beef systems when we want to provide that extra layer of insurance around respiratory disease.
And how can a farmer identify which vaccination program, Tommy, would work best for their farm?
Everyone would love here's the vaccination program for dairy to beef and off you go. There's no such thing, unfortunately. There's variances in the vaccine program. As a general rule, if you're buying calves from multi-sources, a live vaccine on arrival or 24 hours after, 48 hours after arrival works well, be it RSV or PI3 maybe. And then most of those farms will require probably a bacterial pneumonia as well, a dead vaccine where they require 2 shots. That'll be kind of your gold standard for your dairy to beef system where you have multi-source calves coming in. Then you're adding clostridial diseases maybe on top of that later on towards weaning. For farms where they're looking at maybe lower risk and they know the source of origin the calf isn't travelling as far, it might be a case of just a live vaccine on arrival might be enough. But unfortunately, Catherine, I see such variances farm to farm. You really need to tailor to the farm and the risk and challenges that you're there. But as a kind of a gold standard, I would say a live vaccine shortly after arrival, which gives a spike in immunity, and then a dead vaccine in bacterial pneumonia, 2 shots as soon as you can when the calves are settled.
You also mentioned there at the start, Tommy, the outbreaks of scour. What do you see causes the biggest outbreaks of scour? Is it in calves? Is it nutritional related versus infectious?
Yeah, so on your dairy farm, typically it's infectious related, but when we look at our dairy to beef systems, I think it's a mixture of nutritional scours, and we certainly see some lingering issues of rotavirus and cryptosporidium in young calves that are coming in. The majority of the scours, I would say, would be nutritional scours where they might be on whole milk. We're giving a milk replacer, and maybe we're not consistent enough on that milk replacer. Not so much even the quality, but actually consistency and timing and feeding of them is really important. Calves love consistency, so if we can talk about quality milk replacer, but consistency is something I really harp on about, that we get enough of the powder in, mixed properly and fed at the right temperature consistently. Then as calves get older, of course we have the risk of coccidiosis. Sometimes we see salmonella and other scours, but the main ones I would say in kind of your average would be nutritional scours followed by coccidiosis, and in young calves crypto and rota is still a problem if they're brought in too early.
And what do you see as the biggest mistakes that are made when you're treating scours?
I think most of our scours, either nutritional or infectious, are they're either viral, they're nutritional, or their crypto's kind of a parasite. None of them require antibiotics. So the key thing I would say is fluid therapy initially. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm in the space of probiotics and stuff like that myself. But I think something that helps stabilise the gut is useful. But rehydration is key, and getting in early and keeping calves on milk. If we can keep calves drinking, actually the milk and the proteins in milk and the amino acids, etc., help heal the gut. So starving calves or keeping them off milk for prolonged periods of time just while they're on electrolytes can be more harmful than good, and we don't need to be using oral antibiotics. Now salmonella is slightly different, but again it might be injectable antibiotics, and I suppose getting your own vet to make sure, never make a presumption on any of these things, but I would say as a general rule warmth and rehydration is key.
Could you talk through an example of procedure for when calves arrive on the farm that you've seen working well?
Well, what I've seen working well is obviously the calves, depending on the transport distance, plus or minus electrolytes. So if they've gone over, and it's a very hard rule to present, but like say if they've gone over a 20-25 mile journey, and it may be longer, rehydration certainly on arrival is something that a lot of farms will use, an electrolyte to calves. I would try and get them on milk as soon as possible. I wouldn't water down milk, I'd feed it as their normal routine. Some farms, like this is a bit more detailed, they'll actually know what milk replacer the calves have been on and they'll keep them on the same one. Not everyone can do that. I think the key thing for me is that the calves, if they've been transported, that is where I'd prioritise straw. If I'm short on straw, I'd prioritise straw for the first couple of days, that they have a warm, deep bed that they can lie into, and then getting them onto milk. Probably giving them their vaccine, if you're going to give a respiratory vaccine, 24 hours, not immediately on arrival. I'd wait for peak stress to be over. And again, I'm involved in this space of gut health, something to settle the gut and help that calf on arrival as well.
I suppose in the same area, what role is prevention planning with the vet? How is that playing in advance of purchasing calves this spring?
Calves love consistency and routine. So there's 3 pillars to calf health. There's the calf itself, feeding the environment, feeding immunity and what we're going to do with it. The next pillar is the environment. So having somebody throwing an external eye on that environment, just checking ventilation, looking at drainage, and then routines, people. It's all about people. So just checking your routine, going through your milk replacer, going through your feeding regime. What's your plan if you have sick calves? How do you identify a sick calf? What's your plan of action? Because early intervention with disease issues is really key as well. So I think it makes a huge difference to have a calf health plan, as opposed to having all these calves come in and you have no time for disease. But if you don't have time for disease, you've got to just make some time for prevention. It really makes sense. I've seen that time and time again. The more organised we are around routines, systems for calf rearing, the better the results, the more profitable they are at the end of the day.
From your experience working with farmers, Tommy, what 3 things could a farmer focus on this spring?
So if you're buying in calves, I would say focus on prioritising straw in pens. So plenty straw, good bedding. The next thing I'd prioritise is making sure you have a high quality milk replacer and you're feeding enough milk. You don't have to go overboard, but calves really benefit, even bought in calves, from good quality milk replacer at fairly high levels. I'd aim at a minimum of 3 litres twice a day, and I wouldn't be rushing weaning at that. And the last thing is an all in all out system where your calves go into one pen and they stay in it, and don't be mixing age groups.
Finally, Tommy, what would be one myth about calf health or calf care that vets would love to bust?
Every vet probably has something different. I would say we're seeing a trend now upwards on milk feeding. And I know people will feed once a day and they'll have to get on fine. But I think that, more milk causes scour. It doesn't. We must make the link between milk feeding and immune function in young calves. If we do that, it's the best value you get over their lifetime, from a kilos of dry matter into kilos of that they're going to grow. And I think we can't underestimate the importance of the value of milk in young calves, and don't rush weaning.
That's great, Tommy. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Tommy for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.